partly a failure of D&D and partly a failure of their political masters. And this particular file, the Maritime helicopter file, is one that cries out for much closer scrutiny. And I'm surprised that Mr. McKay has not been much firmer on this issue. This is a huge issue for Canadians on the east and the west coast, for our Navy. We all know about the Sea Kings. We know it's grossly unacceptable that the men and women of the Canadian Forces are still reliant on Sea Kings, and yet for 7 years we've had this gross incompetence and I would almost say malpractice on the part of the Department of National Defense.
Hold some of those defense officials responsible, or should some of them face some sort of penalty or consequence? Is that the way to kind of get this issue addressed in the future?
Well, our first recommendation is that the government provide full transparency on this procurement. And I can't really answer the question as to who individually might be responsible without that full transparency. I should also say, though, that our concern, Stewart Webb's concern and my concern, is not so much to look back and assign blame as to help the government find a solution to this crisis. And it is a crisis. Again, the Sea Kings are 50 years old. So the answer here is to recognize that the current approach of allowing DND to essentially run with this on its own is unacceptable. They just keep digging themselves into a deeper hole here. New requirements, new additional costs, reported renegotiations of contracts, but from the weakest possible negotiating position. Someone, the Department of National Defense, the Prime Minister, needs to step in and say enough is enough. Sikorsky, we've got to sort it out fast, and if you're not able to do that, we will go for another helicopter. And here are the 4 alternatives we're going to look at in the next 2 months.
Pardon, ça vous va? Je peux vous poser une question en français? Dans le fond, ce que vous êtes en train de dire, et vous n'êtes certainement pas les premiers à le dire, c'est que le système d'approvisionnement militaire est brisé.
Oui, certainement. Le système de procurement militaire est brisé. C'est dangereux pour les gens qui travaillent dans les forces canadiennes. Ça coûte trop des dollars. Des gens comme moi et vous qui disparaissent dans ces procurements difficiles, compliqués, sans un sens clair des conséquences. Oui, c'est un problème très sérieux pour tous les Canadiens et c'est très important de dire pour 7 ans, ces choses-là, la responsabilité politique reste avec le gouvernement de M. Harper. C'est pas possible avec cette chose ici de dire non, c'est la faute de M. Chrétien. C'est lui qui a annulé le contrat il y a 20 ans. C'est pas suffisant de dire ça. C'est nécessaire de trouver une réponse pour aujourd'hui, pour acheter des hélicoptères qui sont bien capables de faire le travail, pas dans 5 ans ou 10 ans, mais l'année prochaine. There are 2 other things I would like to say very briefly on this file. One is that it's important to underline that none of our allies has chosen the Cyclone. Canada is the first and only buyer of the CH-148. This says 2 things. First of all, it says that other countries have concluded this is not a good helicopter. We are buying a helicopter that has been rejected by other countries. They are choosing the Eurocopter. They are choosing the NH-90. They're choosing the AW101. They're choosing the Seahawk. They're not choosing the Cyclone. Now that says something I think quite powerful about the scope of this mistake. The second related thing to that is that we're not going to get the economic benefits from this procurement that might have been expected had other countries chosen to buy the Cyclone. The Canadian companies who would be subcontracted by Sikorsky to build parts for the Cyclone are not going to get any additional work for overseas sales. So we're pouring at the moment, at least $5.7 billion. That's Auditor General Sheila Fraser, her number in 2010 for this, twice the original, $5.7 billion into this investment with no return realistically expected from overseas sales. So that's just another angle on the incompetence here. With defense procurement, part of the calculation is how do you generate sustained economic activity in this country? And the cyclone procurement is an example of how precisely not to do that. There will not be a significant economic boost for Canada here. No one else is buying this helicopter. We bought a pig in the poke, and other countries, they've seen it, they've recognized our mistake, and they're going elsewhere.
Mr. Webb, concerning your first helicopter that you were talking about, you mentioned a couple of things. Most importantly, you were talking about it being used within the U.S. Army, and it sounded like you were kind of downplaying this as a positive or something to that effect.
Well,
Could you just...
it's based on the Black Hawk. We all know from Black Hawk down. So what they've done is they've actually just Maritime made it into a Marine helicopter. So we don't actually know if it can actually be in sea, capable for float in Sea State 3 or whatever. But what we do know is that the United States Navy has put this in service in 1971 or 9, I believe, and it's still a viable option for them. They're still keeping them. So what we're suggesting is that maybe we should take a look at this also, just in case we can reduce the amount of penalties with Sikorsky and adopt this. So it more than likely is a viable option, but a lot more needs to be known about it.
Four that you listed, is there one that you would say, well, that one would be more practical, at least for Canadians?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there's the NH-90, the NATO frigate helicopter. It might have more interoperability with our European allies, and it's got the technical specifications for it are probably the best one that we've got on the table right now out of the 4 options that we've identified.
Could I just emphasize that our concerns about the Seahawk relate to the fact that it is a helicopter adapted from a helicopter, the Black Hawk, that was designed for use on land. And there is some uncertainty, and has been some uncertainty, as to its flotation capability because it was not designed initially as a naval helicopter. And as Stewart just pointed out, the fact that the U.S. Navy has opted for the Seahawk and has been flying it in significant numbers for decades suggests that this concern about flotation may not be a serious consideration. And therefore, we feel the Seahawk should be very seriously considered. And as Stewart also said, if the government of Canada were to get tough with Sikorsky and have some serious negotiations, one possible option at the end of those negotiations would be to transfer the current contract for Sikorsky Cyclones into a contract for Sikorsky Seahawks, thus enabling both parties to save face and quite possibly to save a significant cost.
Okay. Anything else, Roman? Un autre? Okay. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for coming. There's copies of the report available here for you. Thanks.
Question.